Hello, good evening, everyone. This is Clyde Shirati from Africa Media Australia. I'm happy again to be with you tonight for another edition of AMA online forum, community forum on the North Melbourne and Flemington lockdown. We did the first one last Tuesday. We're very pleased with the reactions and the participation of many people. This is obviously a very important matter for the community, and it's important that we continue to talk about it because there's quite a lot of families and individuals that are caught up in this whole thing. So tonight we will be talking again about it, and I have with me Dr. Chris Lemo, who is a physician, and he is going to be talking to us about his views and sharing his views about this incident. We're going to be addressing some of the things, including the recent submission by a group of African Australian leaders to Daniel Andrews, the Victorian Premier, in relation to this whole thing. Dr. Chris Lamore, how are you today?
I'm well, thank you. Good to see you.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for making yourself available on Africa Media Australia to talk about this. Obviously, you have watched what has been unfolding in the Flemington and North Melbourne area with those housing estates being locked down without notice. Tell us, what do you think about that whole thing?
It was pretty shocking, very sudden and without any warning. I think it was really quite, it was quite something unexpected. I've actually been communicating with a few people who live there and some of the community's contacts that have been helping people out with volunteering and contacts outside. And then I went down myself yesterday to have a look as well, to see what was going on. Look, I think it was a bit shocking at first because there are a lot of police around, and I ended up meeting some of the nurses who were going to do the testing up in the flats and accompanied them. And I mean, they were very nice to the people that they were testing, but the whole thing was quite stressful, I think, for everybody involved. It's a massive emergency services type operation with a bit of a health flavor rather than a health-driven operation. And there was a lot of confusion. I think the residents particularly were very stressed and concerned and angry, I think, about the lack of consistent information and the responsiveness of the services was not what they had hoped for. I think that's getting better now. It was certainly one of the main problems was that they were locked up with no information. They were not allowed to help themselves because they had a very little warning, like 2 hours warning. All of the volunteers and family outside were not allowed to help them. And then the services themselves were not helping them. So they were really left in the lurch for a while there. I think now it's getting better.
I understand you went there in Flemington. What did you observe? What did you see?
So a lot of police. There were sort of public order response vehicles parked all around the perimeter of the estate, and police visibly outnumbering everybody else, it seemed. And then I guess an army of nurses from various places that were going to do the testing, a couple of doctors, and a lot of SES people around as well. Yes, what I saw. Yeah.
That's good. Now, later on, we'll be talking about some of the reactions from the African Australian community. Let me just bring in also another guest of ours, Adungwat Manuel, who is South Sudanese journalist. Adungwat, how are you?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. We're talking about the Flemington North Melbourne housing estate lockdowns. What are your views when you saw all of that unfolding?
Yeah, I was quite shocked at first, and as the days went by, I decided to go down myself and check it out the day before yesterday. So that was day 3, and I got some interviews with some people on the ground. On day 3, there were policemen on horses, which wasn't the case on day 1 and day 2. So it's been escalating in numbers and in, I'll say, aggression. There were people yelling out from the windows, help us. You can see people crying. And I know people in there personally, so I called in and people are very distressed at the moment, and so are we from the outside looking in.
All right. Do you know anybody in particular from your network of friends and families who are caught up in that whole thing?
I do. I actually called in today to ask how some people were holding up. And although there's the release of the people at midnight, a lot of people are very skeptical that it'll happen or that the police will actually back off straight away, which is it's made a lot of people uncomfortable, I think, more than anything else at the moment.
Dr. Chris, from a physician point of view, obviously this issue may cause a lot of mental health issues, and people may be caught up in situation where their health may deteriorate because of this whole thing. What do you think needs to be done to minimize such things?
Well, I think the residents themselves have actually been extremely well organised. There are a lot of people in there who have got experience working in health or working with government, or have got connections with people who do, as well as people in all sorts of situations. And they're very strongly networked on social media, and I think very quickly organised themselves to support each other and link with people on the outside who could provide support. The main frustration was actually not being able to find a consistent point of contact with the department. And that was really messing up a whole lot of things. I think that is being addressed now, although it wasn't this afternoon when I was talking to them. But I think certainly the stress of it all, the concern about the coronavirus itself, the sudden distress about being essentially locked up without warning, the concern about being able to access food, the concern about being able to access medication, the concern about being able to provide for children and elderly people or people with disabilities who they're caring for. There was also, I don't know, I think it was the lack of communication and the lack of any endpoint was really distressing people a lot, I think.
All right. Now, do you think the government is justified to take that sort of step? Obviously, there's been spread an increase in the number of contaminations, and I don't know what sort of intelligence they had, but I'm assuming that they must have had an information that there's a cluster of contamination in those areas. Therefore, it was important to take that step.
That's
Do
what
you
it
think they're
sounds like.
justified?
I haven't seen obviously the numbers, but obviously someone was concerned. Late on Friday, they were concerned that the numbers were problematic and that they needed to contain everything. I guess the irony of it is that if the residents had been consulted months earlier or weeks earlier, they would have probably asked for this to be done, but it would have been done in a much better way. I mean, I think there was a lack of preparedness, I think, was really concerning, and a lack of cooperation and engagement with the residents themselves, who know the situation. They know who lives where and with whom. They know people's medical conditions, and they're able to manage the space with appropriate support and information. And I think it was a shame that that wasn't done much earlier. And people were actually asking for more support and more information in the last few months. Just one other thing that was quite interesting. There were people who were visiting there who were trapped there. They don't even live there. So they were just, the door was just shut. So I think the way whether it was done or not, I think whether it was the right thing to do or not is one question, but the way it was done, definitely wrong. This is going to happen again. So I think it's really important that we learn some lessons from this, because this is not going to be the last time we're in this situation.
What about you, Arangot? What do you think? Do you think that the government was justified in taking the step they did?
I think I agree with most points that Chris raised. It's not the issue of justification, because COVID-19, is justification enough, but it is the way that they did it. There was no mercy, no courtesy for these communities, for these people living in these flats. Why does everybody else get the benefit of the doubt? To do the right thing at a certain time, to be home after a certain time, Why weren't they extended that courtesy? Why was the response so militant and not medical? Where were the doctors and the health staff instead of the police officers? And the whole lack of communication between organizations and police and residents was all out of whack. So in all of that, there was no reason to go about it that way. There was so many ways that, or so many ways in which we could have gone about it in terms of providing resources in different languages, because we heard from a lot of people from the inside that it was past 24 hours before they got any information, and it was over a PA system and some pamphlets that were all in English. The fact that they weren't allowed to help their neighbors in translation, or just like elderly neighbors who had nobody with them, they weren't allowed to see anybody else in their blocks. So it was just the fact that there was no mercy in the way that they did things that was not justified at all.
Okay, let me just remind our viewers, if you're watching us out there, we would like you to participate in this forum. It is a forum. We want you to comment. We want you to ask questions. You can do that by making comments on Facebook or YouTube by tapping them. You can also, if you like, join us on studio, virtual studio, and you can make comments using a video through your mobile, laptop, or internet. We're more than welcome. You are more than welcome to ask us that. Just send us a message on the number that I will be showing very soon. Now, Dr. Chris, I'm referring to, I think it was yesterday, there was a number of organizations, including the Human Rights, Amnesty International, and a number of community legal centers who published media release where they were pretty critical of the steps taken by Daniel Andrews' government. Do you share some of those concerns? And
I haven't actually seen that document, and I'm not a lawyer, but
yeah.
I think there would be many legal questions to be asked, and I know there are people with legal experience in the bloc who are going to be asking those questions. So, obviously, it raises all sorts of issues around civil liberties, around human rights. But I'm not at all qualified to talk about them, unfortunately. So I'll leave that one and just say that the people who are most directly affected and are in a position to ask those questions in an expert manner will be doing that. And I'm really interested in seeing how that plays out.
That's right. Okay, that's fine. Now you participated in a meeting for African community leaders and individuals who came together to discuss this whole matter, and then they published a document to submit to Daniel Andrews. What do you make of? I will be going through some of those details, but in general, you were part of that meeting. What do you make of that whole exercise?
I think it was really good. It all happened very short notice. It was really a credit to the people that organised that, to pull so many people together at such short notice and then make a plan of action and enact it all within a very short space of time. And I think this speaks again to the resources and the resourcefulness of community in this. Another really impressive example was there's a group called I can't remember the name. It's a self-help group in the southeast. Wani Lefrere is the person that I know who works with them. They produced information for the residents about what had happened and translated it into many different languages within the space of 24 hours, including written languages, including oral languages. And it was a really very well-focused, clear, concise piece of information, very useful. And I think the other thing that happened today was there was communication between the residents, people outside, and the ministers, the premier, senior people in the public service. All was happening very, very quickly, and this is all driven by community, which I think the really important lesson we could really take from this is that community is where a lot of the resources are, creative solutions that fit the situation are, if allowed to create those solutions and given the resources to create those solutions, we can do it. And it's really important to not make people vulnerable and prevent them from helping each other, and then call them marginalized and vulnerable, and then not help them. That's not the way to do it. It won't work.
Now, many people are asking for the government to reduce the number of police presence in the area. What's your view on that?
I think it's great. I think it's a really good thing. Most of them weren't doing anything when I saw. There were some who were there to provide assistance to the testing teams on the floor, but there were lots and lots of police who were not doing anything except standing too close to each other and making a risk of coronavirus spread amongst their force. And they didn't want to be there. They didn't realize that they didn't think that they needed to be there. So actually, nobody really wanted them to be there in such large numbers.
That's
okay,
right,
I don't
Chris.
got. Yeah.
They a lot of them didn't know what was going on between themselves. So one person would say something, another person would say something else. So it was very disorganized. Yes, they were standing a little too close to one another. I also observed that in large numbers for no particular reason, especially when all of the residents are on the inside. So what is the point? I definitely think that there needs to be a reduction of police presence. We all know that having police, or the relationship between police and minority communities and the distrust that goes between them. So this isn't helping the situation. This isn't helping people feel safe. And there were people that were interviewed that said people have been refraining from actually asking for medical help just because they simply feel intimidated by the situation. There are police on not just on the outside of the buildings, but on every level, patrolling the area as well. So that in itself is already placing fear in people's hearts, and it's not a safety issue anymore. It's more intimidation. So I definitely support the reduction of police ASAP.
No problem. I'm going to bring Dr. Burhan in. Dr. Burhan is a community leader with a lot of experience, and he obviously has been advocating for communities for quite a while, and he's been involved in trying to communicate to the government and all other service providers about what are some of the feelings from the community in relation to this matter. Dr. Burhan, how are you this evening? Good. All right. Tell us what you think about this whole thing. Obviously, from the beginning, you saw this unfolding. Within a couple of hours or so, people were being asked to pretty much locked into their houses. And what does that bring to your mind?
Well, look, to be honest with you, given what has gone through, I have attended the place for the last 4 days. I've been there and I first-hand experienced what was going from inside outside. The problem, as the guy said, the presence of police created more fear and more chaos to the problem than solution. The community has been disturbed, and to be honest with you, standing there myself yesterday, I saw people addicted with drugs were just pushing their way into the doors and coming and falling on the ground wanting their admission. This should not be treated by police. This should be treated by medical officers who understand. Police will lock them, they tie their hand and put them on the ground. Was that a solution? So and also one of the biggest problems in my experience, to be honest with you, they moved Spring Street into Flemington. The bureaucracy was more interested in ticking boxes to do something than doing it. Let me tell you, bureaucrats, they are good doing sending letters to people, not meals. They can't send lunch and afternoon dinner or medicine to people in places. The way the bureaucracy or the chain of command was working was chaos. Imagine on day 2, I brought a donation from a butcher, about 100 kilos, and I asked them if they would allow it at 11 o'clock. The meat came at 12 o'clock and has been waiting for approval from them to process this meat to be delivered to the family. Imagine after waiting until 4 o'clock, I said to start distributing. After getting to 20 families, we got an order coming to say, no, you're not allowed to take the meat.
Okay.
Already afternoon, already the meat out of stock. So what I'm saying is the process brought in that place to manage has been by itself a chaos because different departments and different authorities, they don't know who is doing what and who to ask to do what. So reaching
Okay.
to the families, reaching to the people was absolutely chaos. Lunch,
No worries.
instead of giving breakfast, it was getting for a dinner. So the meal was delayed because of the process.
So there are obviously a lot of issues that have been observed. Now, let me go into this document with recommendations made by a group of African Australian community leaders here in Melbourne. The first one says the government must apologize to the residents and communities affected for declaring a lockdown without warning to residents. Dr. Chris, do you think that is needed in this case?
Yes, it definitely is. I think one of the interesting things that I observed was that because the response is an emergency services response, it's very process focused rather than people focused. But of course, people live their lives, as people, not as processes. So there's a real disconnect there. And I think to be treated as a problem or as an object to be moved or a problem to be solved rather than as a person is definitely an insult to the dignity of anybody. And everybody inside felt that, and they can give a very detailed and very precise explanation of exactly what happened on that level, that moral level. And I think it is really important that that be acknowledged, that the government apologise for what it has done to them and make some step to re-establish the trust which was broken. I think it's a really important step.
I don't go. Some people may argue that the government doesn't need to apologize because they're just doing their job to try to protect the community, including obviously the people who have been locked down, and that has been necessary.
So the problem
What's
with
your
that,
view?
so the problem with that is, who is the community, who is the society that's being protected? Because although the rhetoric is protecting the vulnerable from the virus, what it felt like to the people who talked to me and the discussions that I observed between them is that they felt that society was being protected from them, and that they were being locked up, left to their own devices to prevent them being a threat to the rest of the community. And I think that is a really just a fundamental betrayal of the trust between a government and its citizens, and it needs to be acknowledged and apologized for.
All right, I don't go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Let's say at the simplest form, they don't apologize for the isolation, because you could argue that people who come from overseas also have to go into isolation. So what is the difference? What they need to apologize for is the way they came about it. The fact that there was no warning. Okay. What about the people that Chris mentioned earlier, the ones that came to visit, family members and friends that came to visit, who are most likely still locked in the apartments there? They need to apologize to all of the people that they gave expired food to in the first couple of days that they were giving food. They need to apologize to the people that they refused to give medication to, just because, people are numbers and not people in this case. There's a lot to apologize for here. These people were treated like they're not Australians. They were treated appallingly, almost as similarly as the people who come by boat, which we know are being violated, or their human rights are being violated. The fact that it's happening right here in Melbourne, that's an issue. And you need to apologize as a government.
All right, Dr. Berhan, one other thing that has been mentioned in that document is there's a poor coordination of all the teams that are working in the estate. Do you think that there should be a better coordination and structure to manage the whole thing there?
Without doubt, people who are managing are not meant to manage this process. They're good to manage other things, but this thing was messy because these people were not prepared to do what we were doing. As I said, meals served on time. You don't bring meals in the morning until you tick all the boxes. By evening, the lunch gets evening. But also, what I want to add to the apology, I would be slightly different. In every sense, we all have to stand one thing. Our kids are crying. They're not waking up in the morning because they feel ashamed of their identity. They feel ashamed of their background. They feel ashamed of their family because they see themselves, we are bad. We need a proper public apology because it gives our kids moral. Why kids jump off the bed in the morning? Why our kids are not jumping out of the bed in the morning? Because psychologically, they are destroyed. So as a society, in every step, we have to think about the children because they're coping, going to school to see their friends. They're not feeling proud of who they are. So unless we ask these things and be public, our kids will remain dropping out of school, being rebellion because no one is defending them. So for me, what I see in this case is public apology by the Premier and many of the authorities that was handling. It's a proper process because our kids locked with no reason makes them feel because they are of this family, because they are of this background, because of this whatever. So the only way this apology is important because our kids deserve to feel proud of who they are. Thank you.
No problem. Dr. Chris, another thing is it seems people have an issue with the DHHS, the Department of Health or Housing Services, whatever the abbreviation stands for, that they are not doing a very good job locally. Is that your feeling as well?
Well, this goes back to what Dr. Barhan said, because it was very disorganized. The residents were very organized. The volunteers were very organized. The only people who were not organized was the department that was supposed to be organizing things between them. And I think there was no clear line of reporting, there was no clear accountability, and there was nobody who was a single point of contact between the department and the residents, or between the department and the external volunteers, who could actually make decisions and convey reliable information in a realistic time frame. And I think that was the real problem. It was very, very rushed and very unprepared. But there was no process where people could make decisions, rely on them, know what was happening, and actually engage with the people who could say very clearly what their needs were, and even if they were allowed to address those needs themselves, but they were prevented from doing that because there was just no one to talk to. They were talking into a void.
All right, now I'll get some comments from some of the viewers here. We have Barry who says people should be realistic and realize that Africans are not the only ones being isolated in these circumstances. The government is doing its job under very difficult circumstances, and people should stop being over sensitive in this matter.
Sorry? Can I respond to that point?
Yeah, so go ahead.
Definitely, it's not only Africans in there. There are people from many, many different ethnic backgrounds in there. The only thing that they have in common is that they live there and they're in that community. I don't think it's being oversensitive to ask the government services to know what they themselves are doing, and to be able to ask the residents what they need and deliver that. And I don't think it's oversensitive to criticize a government that prevents people from helping themselves and then does not help them. I don't think that's being oversensitive. I think that's just a basic expectation of a decent, competent government.
Okay, I don't got. What do you think? Tell me. You think maybe people are being too emotional or too, overreactive in this thing?
Well, that's the thing. When you hear what is being said by the government on TV, it sounds beautiful. People are getting paid to stay home.
So
what is there to complain about? Can you hear me? Yeah. So
yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah, go ahead.
If we were to follow what the TV says and what the government says on TV, which is people are getting paid all of this money to stay home, what is it to complain about? People are getting delivered food right to their door. What is it to complain? If that was the reality, I would be jealous myself. I would want to be in those flats right now. But that is not the case. For anyone who's been on the ground, you will notice straight away that there's a huge difference in what's going on or what's being said in the media and the realities. And the reality is people are suffering. And it's not overreactive. What's going on in there is actually a lot worse than what we're seeing. And if people just had the opportunity, like Mr. Barry, I believe, had the opportunity to just go there and see people in complete anguish, he'd understand.
I just would say as well, I mean, I think that's really, it's really important to understand that, the difference between the rhetoric and the reality. One thing I do have to say is that nobody is trying to do the wrong thing. The government's not trying to do the wrong thing. The services are not trying to do the wrong thing. The police are not trying to do the wrong thing. The residents are not trying to do the wrong thing. It's just that to actually get things done, people need to work together, and that was not happening the last few days.
Okay, so it's just the working together. Dr. Berhan, what would be some of the things you recommend? I know that things have evolved, and apparently all except one of the towers, people will be, now they will go to level 3 restrictions rather than being locked down. So things are evolving there. But what are some of the lessons, the most important lessons we need to start learning in case this starts again?
Well, the first lesson we need to learn is consultation. People need to be consulted. This is the process and what can be done. But also sending a force of police, making a scene of a crime scene, it defeats the purpose of the public health. So the best lesson we learn is, like I know people, and this is where I don't see sensitivity. There are people with mental health. There are people with autistic children. There are people with special needs. All these people have been treated as if everyone is the same. So we need to consult. We need to treat people with respect and ask what's the best way to deal on this matter. The safety is for everyone. It's not about one group or the other group. The safety from this COVID-19 is for everyone's best interest. But the question is, people need respect. We're not asking any charity way of something that makes. No, we're asking dignified process has to take place. But what's most important now, in my observation, spending 3.5 days there until this evening, like they had workers. And I'm not racist here, but I just want to make this. The workers were all Indians distributing the food. What about our community? We were volunteers there waiting to be orders to get a pass. Why can't they recruit the people who speak the language, who understand the people they're delivering? At least even 10%, even 20%, 50%. There were none of our people, the people who were taking food, who were delivering things, were other people. Now, isn't it fair to think that these people, at least when they see their own people coming to their doorstep, they can say something to them, they can feel confident, they can see that there is communication? No.
Maybe Dr. Berhan, is it the case maybe that the Indian community, because I saw some report on TV about some Indian charity that were giving food, free food. Maybe they were a little more proactive, and they've got all the gear and everything, and then they may not be something in our community.
That is the Sikh community has been doing the free for the volunteers. They were filling the volunteers on the ground. But what I'm saying is, these are paid workers by the government.
Okay.
In that process, I'm not saying why they employed them, but what I'm saying is, let's be fair. Who are we dealing with? The people we're dealing with are the people who are, like, there was no Vietnamese working there. There should be some Vietnamese.
I suppose you're saying there should be a diversity in the people that they've hired to assist as volunteers.
Exactly. And I don't have any bad feeling about the Indians. But what I'm saying is, I was standing there waiting for permission to do something. Whereas these boys were going everywhere, the building and delivering food. Most of them They were just acting like a machine because they don't have any relation with the people.
Yep.
So if you have people from the community, it's a resource. Be it
No
a
problem.
volunteer or paid workers. We've got a lot of young people unemployed. If we
All right.
would make, I would bring, I've got an organization linking with young people. We can bring them to do the job. So the question is, what we learn from this is respect of the people. When you respect is consultation. Consultation makes inside it to the community what to do, how to do, and with whom to do it.
I think that's a
Okay?
really
Thank you
good
very much.
point, Dr.
Yeah,
Berhan, because
go
I
ahead,
think
Dr. Chris.
that sort of goes to exactly what I was saying before, because it's being approached as a logistics exercise, and so it's like, okay, we have this number of mouths to feed, we have this much food to move, okay, we hire this many bodies to carry the food to the mouths, and it's just so mechanical and inhumane. Whereas there needs to be relationships, there needs to be communication, and with, as Dr. Berhan said, with respect, with consultation, comes the ability to solve problems as they arise in a very efficient way, much more efficient than the way that was done, in the last few days, with a much better outcome, without all of this pain.
Now, I am assuming in my mind that perhaps one of the reasons why the government didn't give so much notice is because they may have thought if we tell people we're going to lock them, you're going to lock their estate down in whatever amount of time, some people may not like that. They may escape and go into the broader community and even spread the virus more. Do you think that's a sort of a rational? I mean,
I suspect that was an assumption. It would be very interesting to ask who made that assumption and on what basis they made that assumption, and I think challenge them on it, because I think that is already taking people in a very negative light and making all sorts of assumptions about what they think, what they understand, what they want, and what their view of their relationship with other people is, which may not at all be justified when you actually ask them.
Okay, I don't go ahead.
Exactly. Why is the rest of Victoria given the benefit of the doubt? What is it about the community in those buildings that is so suspicious that they must be contained in such a way? This is their homes, just like we live in our homes. Would we pack our bags and run away if the government would say we're going to self-isolate you? No. Like, where are you going to go? Why are the ideas already put forth on these people without asking them the questions in the first place? So the fact that you're already viewing these people as guilty or as suspicious or as people who can't follow the rules, that is a big problem in itself.
Okay. Now, moving forward, it's actually one other thing I'm going to ask you, Dr. Chris, because you're probably more equipped for this. How is it that it was revealed today that there is one tower in that whole area there that is that they had no infection, and they're pretty close to the other towers? Knowing how the virus, I'm assuming you have more expert knowledge in that. How could that happen if there's one tower who has about 75 people who tested positive, and the next door has 0?
It's a spread by close contact. So you have to be in close contact with the person to transmit it to them. And if those contacts did not occur, then the transmission would not occur. So it tells you where people were in contact with each other in what spaces. And we still don't know how all of the people who have got the infection in those buildings, whether those infections are actually related to each other, or whether there are a few groups of infections that are related to each other, but more related to infections from outside contacts. So that will presumably become apparent over the next few weeks. But it's a close contact is how it spreads.
But you would think that like kids who are infected would go down and play in the playground, and then some other kids. Anyway, that's more.
It depends on how much contact they had. So if they went and just played on the playground, there might not be much. But if they went and shared, lollipops or something, there would definitely be.
Now, Dr. Burra, let me come back to you. Now, is it the case? I mean, is it good to think that the very fact that this lockdown decision had to be made so quickly without notice is in itself a failure of the administration of the whole thing, or because I've heard some argument that, well, amongst other things, the housing, there's been public housing issue for quite a long period of time, and the way people live in those buildings is not the best, and the government should have done a better job of looking into this earlier rather than let it go to this extent.
Clyde, one thing I like to say here is important. First, I have raised this issue back in March when I visited the high rise, when I saw people there. I wrote this to the premiers, whatever. I wrote emails and I sent. In fact, you saw some of my media release at the time. I was talking about this. I went to these places and I saw people walking in one flat, in one lift, in a 1 meter square. There were about 9, 10 people. We were talking outside, and this was the peak time of COVID-19, around late March and April. But also now the question is, what do we learn from here so we don't repeat it in Carlton or Fitzroy or Hollywood or other places? My concern is not what happened now. My concern is how do we not repeat? Because we don't need to be the guinea pigs of the game. This is important that the government now cannot tell us that because of COVID, because of the spread of the virus, we need to let these things happen. No, we need to learn from what happened, and this should not be repeated. We should take cautiously in Carlton, Hollywood, Richmond, and many other buildings around the city and within the perimeter of the city. We need to help them now with good cleaners, public officers who understand about this, that can help the place to avoid whatever can be, mitigated in the past with the 9 buildings. So for me, the best lesson is not to repeat this mistake again if anything happened in the next of buildings around the city, because we had enough traumas of this going through this process and should not be repeated again for the same reason, because this is the biggest trial that has been done with no study, and I don't know what we come out with it, because as Chris said, there was no preparation to manage it. In fact, if we go back to every year, the government deadline was to start at midnight, giving people some time to shop, some time to prepare. So from 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock to wait to midnight, would people run away from Melbourne by that time? I mean, look, this is mistrust. What I think is, like what they gave us tomorrow night, that was on Tuesday. They said for Melbourne, third stage will start midnight Wednesday. For the same reason, they should have waited at least until midnight, the people to have shop themselves to look for whatever they want, or medication to buy, or anything to be done. But to put it within half an hour and to send 500 police on the ground, well, I don't think we need to call this is a mistake or not. This is a big problem to the community and to the children growing in that area. Will affect for the time. Thank you.
No problem. Now, one member of the audience says, that's Joel Marie Andre, says, I've been involved in as one of the organization in the area providing support. Yes, this certainly could have been handled a little better, and the importance of having greater collaboration within organizations. However, it took 3 days before food reached the tower. When responding to a health crisis, having police presence only heightens the situation. I suppose that echoes many of the things that have been said here previously. Now we're getting close to the end of this session. I'm just going to ask you to summarize and with a closing message. What maybe one message to the government and the other to the community. Dr. Chris, I'll start with you.
Thanks. So I think for the government, work with community. Start working now, build relationships, and that will make everyone's life much, much easier. To the community, keep doing what you're doing. Educate yourselves, learn, work together, and hold government to account. They're there to work for us, and they will do their job if we help them do their job, but they have to actually come to the table as well.
I don't what?
Yeah, so my message goes both to the government and to our community. So what I've learned is that our community, especially the African communities that I'll talk about, is that collectively we can really create change. We can put pressure on MPs, we can put pressure on local government organizations to treat us the way we want to be treated. We just got to figure out how to come together collectively. And to our community, we have to realize our power. We have to realize that together we have the numbers to really say something and to make things happen. So we need to realize our potential to change policy. We need to figure out that we're in a position of power to really become a part of this economic sphere. So we just need to really come together, sit down, make some plans, and start moving forward.
Okay. Dr. Burhan, your final message before we conclude.
Well, my final message to the government is there are many buildings, and all these buildings need to be treated fairly now before the crisis starts. Yes, we are worried about the spread of this, that each area is different, and these people living in high rise has a different condition, as was said in this media and in this crisis that we were talking. So to avoid that mistake, I'm a bit worried if this could happen based on any infection, as this virus is with us for some time to come. We need to be careful to manage this before it gets to the place. For my communities, what I need to say is, well, we need to separate between what is being done and the safety of every one of us. The safety is important. The goal of the process is important for all of us. We need to adhere to the message. What we're not happy is the treatment and the process in place. But protecting ourselves, our families, our friends is important because this virus does not know the friend or the enemy or anyone. So collectively, we need to be the best example in looking after each other and protecting every one of us and doing the right thing. One thing we have in our community that I have learned, my community always I see them, they have got fear of the law. You know, understanding the law and applying the law is much better. So if we understand what is required for this prevention, I think it would be much better and good ambassadors for our community to stand tall, to show everyone we do the right thing and we do it in the best way that we protect everyone. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much to all of you. We appreciate your time to African Media Australia to talk about this important matter for our communities. We're coming to the end of this show today. We obviously know that this is an important issue and it is going to continue. Some good news, as we said earlier, that most of the people who've been caught up in this lockdown will now be a little freer, that we're going to, stage 3 restrictions rather than being locked in their residencies. There's still one tower that will remain in lockdown. Hopefully, things will improve for that, for people in that tower as well. There are lessons to be learned. It is a crisis. When you're handling a crisis, you do the best to handle things the best possible, and then you got to learn lessons so that in the next time around, things are improved. We hope that message will reach both the government and the community to be able to handle these sort of things better. I want to say thank you to all of you. It's still stage 3 restrictions, and we are trying to handle this as much as possible. But hopefully, we'll all see each other at the end of this crisis. Thanks very much.
Thank you
Right.
very much.
Thank you.
After we are
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.